All right, this is Dr. Loren C. Scott, a professor emeritus of economics at LSU and president of Loren C. Scott and Associates, Inc.
One of the true heavyweights in the industry. You do forecasting for the state of Louisiana when it comes to energy and economics generally, don't you?
Well, what I put out and have been putting out for almost 4 decades is the Louisiana Economic Outlook. And in the Louisiana Economic Outlook, we always have forecasts for oil prices and for natural gas prices, and also for employment in the kind of key oil and gas sectors of our state, which is basically Shreveport, Houma, and Lafayette, big oil centers. So if you're going to, we're the number, well, at one time we were the number 2 producer of oil, number 2 producer of natural gas. Like we slipped a bit on natural gas. And so if you're going to forecast the Louisiana economy, you got to know the energy sector.
Without a doubt. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on today's program is you do a great job of just stating the way things are, and whether you agree or disagree with me, that sort of thing. And one of these questions I'm going to ask today is more of a it's more of a speculative question mixed with a little bit of politics and mixed with just some common sense here. And we don't get into politics on this program, but this is something I think a conversation needs to have in the world of natural gas. When we look at the subsidies, the government subsidies that have gone to, like, say, solar and wind, for example, what would happen if we shifted that to natural gas? And the reason I say that is because the flaring's a real problem. And there's a lot of great little science projects going on, but the oil and gas industry is taxed quite a bit, and they do pay a lot of fees, and then they support a lot of church bake sales and kids softball uniforms and everything else. And then now they got to pay for research and development on top of it too. What would happen, do you think? Or is that even a conversation that anybody would be open to if they shifted some of those solar and wind dollars to natural gas? Because I think it's a solvable problem. And that's my approach on this, is that not because they need subsidies, but because I think it's an actual solution that could happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I number one, they don't need it. Right now we're producing more natural gas than we can say grace over, and of course the clear indicator of that is what you guys and what the people in the Permian Basin are now doing with a lot of natural gas. That is, they're having to flare it off. They're having to flare it off because they don't have enough ways to get it the heck out of where they are right now. As a matter of fact, some natural gas is actually flowing out of the Permian Basin, has been selling at a negative price. The producers have been paying people to take it because there's just so darn much of it that they have to get rid of. We could have a whole long conversation about the role of natural gas versus renewables. I have to be a big believer in fossil fuels and natural gas in particular. But whatever you and I may think about it, the renewables like wind and solar have got a grasp on, especially the utility side. They are servicing customers, and the customers are flat demanding that some of their electricity be produced with renewables. They're just demanding that, and which to me is really kind of crazy, because you're going to end up happening here what happened in Europe, and that is when they started switching to renewables, the price of their electricity went up. In some cases, went up markedly, so much so that some of them started backing off on demanding so much wind and solar. So I think number one, I think there's zero appetite out there for subsidizing natural gas, politically speaking, and I think there is some appetite out there for subsidizing wind and solar, but even that is starting to go away now. They're basically saying, look, if you want to compete out there with natural gas, I think that's more towards where things are leaning right now.
Well, let's do a quick little brief about the natural gas and the renewables, because, I don't know this for a fact, but I would say that if I'm looking from a 5,000-foot view, the subsidies that have gone into the wind and solar industry over the last, say, 20 years, and the projections that were given back to us whether it be the politicians or from the energy companies themselves, has fallen short. They're not at the megawatt of or terawatt of storage like they thought they would be in solar. And a lot of the reports coming out of Texas now that these solar panels did not make the money or the returns that they thought they would. And I agree with you. There's zero appetite for a conversation in this. That's why I'm having it, because I just see how close we are to actually solving a real problem as a country. It's a shame to see all that natural gas get flared, is what I'm getting at. So just
yeah. I totally agree with you. There are so many advantages that natural gas has over wind and solar, as I see it. Number one is we've got plenty of it. The nice thing about natural gas is it's always there. It's the one constant. You got plenty of it. It's going to be there. Whereas the wind does not always blow, and the sun does not always shine. And when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, which typically happens at the very time you need the wind to blow and the sun to shine, is you have to have a backup, and that backup is always going to be natural gas-fired power plants. And there's just other things that the people who promote this just grossly ignore. One is that wind and solar take up huge amounts of land. I mean, you have to cut down lots of trees to put in a solar facility, especially the states in the southeast that are very wooded. The west is not so bad, but in the southeast, you got to cut down a lot of trees. And it's amazing, if you're cutting down trees for wind and solar, there's no hue and cry about spotted owl habitat going away or bird habitat going. They don't care in those particular cases. Which brings us to in the wind, people, the environmentalists totally ignore the bird kill. I mean, the bird kill on wind is just astonishing. The Audubon Institute looked at just one canyon, California. I think it's called the Amada Canyon. I believe that's right. And that one canyon kills something like 4,000 birds a year, and it's very indiscriminate. You got golden eagles in there, you got raptors in there, not just sparrows and other birds that you might not really care about. So the wind and solar folks get away with a lot simply because they're renewable, and I think that's a side that needs to be spoken about a whole lot more than it is.
Let me ask you about the wind program's reclamation. Last I checked, it's been a number of years, but my understanding is they really didn't have a cohesive or very, very good reclamation program. So a lot of those farmers are just going to have those wind turbines sitting there long after their expiration date.
Well, there's that. Plus, I think a lot of farmers who bought into that also discovered something else, and that is that living close to wind turbines is not a particularly happy thing to go through. I mean, they are not quiet. There is a hum that's associated with them that is nerve-wracking to many people. That has been a problem as well. And so it is just not all nice. Where I'm actually from the Permian Basin. I'm from West Texas. And out there, you don't have to worry about trees, and you don't have to worry about birds so much. There's not hardly any birds because it's such much desert area. So it's okay. The problem is you keep coming back to this, and that is that the wind doesn't blow all the time. In particular, the wind doesn't blow so much in June, July, and August. It's just not real constant like it is the rest of the times of year. And that's the very time you need to be generating electricity to run our air conditioners. And they haven't figured out the storage problem yet when it comes to electricity generated by wind and solar. And until they do that, they've just got. It's going to still remain, I think, almost a single-digit part of our electricity grid.
How about when it comes to solar? Of course, solar, a lot of people think it's a great renewable as well. Some of the things that I've looked at is, of course, the mining when it comes to creating the batteries that are behind.
Sure.
Is a little bit more like your bird issue reminded me of the issues with solar, which are kind of counterintuitive too. And this goes all the way back to the paper and plastic bag argument when people started realizing that paper bags were worse for the environment than plastic ones, because paper ones, not only you cutting the trees down, but now you got to use all of this other energy in order to create the pulp and the paper and the bags, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I see happening on the solar side of things is between the production and the lithium mines and everything else. What are some of the issues that you see with solar? Those are the ones that I see. They're not up to par, but there are other disadvantages to solar that you see?
Well, I mean, again, to me, the main things, if you want to do solar anywhere other than the desert areas of the United States, if you want to do it, say, in the southeastern part of the United States or the northeastern part, just the eastern part of the United States in general, you've got to cut down a humongous amount of trees. You've got to destroy a lot of forest in order to start meaningfully generating a lot of electricity by way of solar. And of course, that's also the area of the country that quite often is cloudy. And for sure, the sun only shines half the time of the year. And also, if you read some of the literature on the bird kill associated with solar, there's quite a bit of that too, because what you're doing is you're taking those mirrors and you're reflecting it into one place. And if the birds fly through that place, it's like being zapped. I mean, they just get zapped as they fly through that area. So to me, we keep kind of coming back to when it comes to solar, your fuel costs are almost free, but there's a whole lot of stuff that is not free. And the bird kill, the destruction of forest area, the fact that you can't store it yet, they haven't figured out a way to do that. What that means is you always have to have a coal-fired power plant, a natural gas-fired power plant as a backup when the wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine, which means ultimately you're still going to have to pay for that gas-fired power plant. And it's just not clear to me that in the long run this is a good plan.
Well, and that's why I keep going back to the crazy argument for natural gas subsidies, because it just seems like no matter how you slice and dice it, whether you're talking about coal or whether you're talking about wind or solar, it just seems like that natural gas has to be there as the fail-safe, as the safety net. And right now we've got such an abundance, like you were saying, it's trading on a negative dollar value down there in the Permian because there's so much of it. But then I just see all these capitalists that are, the one guy, there's some crazy guy up in Canada using natural gas to mine Bitcoins. I don't even know how that works, but good for him. And then you got these other guys trying to convert it into liquid natural gas and other guys trying to turn it into batteries and everything. I just see where, solar and wind has really had, no pun intended, but they've had their day in the sun, and their advancements are less than stellar. They promised they'd be further along.
Yeah, I think that's true. Now, however, what is going on is that if you go to virtually any of your utility firms, the people who are actually generating electricity, they are just under immense political pressure to switch to more renewables. I mean, it is very, very, it is a very, very strong and powerful political force on them. So they're doing it anyway. I mean, they're gonna switch to it, even though there are issues associated with reliability, associated with other aspects of all the things that you and I have been talking about that are negative. They are still being politically pressured to do that, to switch to renewables. So I think it's a march that's going to continue on, and I think it's going to be slow because people are going to find out about the cost of it, especially the utility cost of it. So I think there's just going to be a problem there down the line.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see just kind of iron out a little bit, and instead of trying to say everything's for this, maybe you just figure out the pockets they're good for. I mean, farmers figured out a pretty good use for wind a long time ago, and solar power seems to power up cell phones and batteries, the smaller type things. And so maybe that's just more of the conversation is how, after 20 years of pretty good R&D, what is wind and solar actually used for, and how can we best maximize it and admit maybe some of these things are wrong. But anyway, that's...
Well, I will tell you, as you've probably figured it out the number of times you and I have talked before, is that I'm kind of a very market-oriented economist. And so my position is we try to keep the government as much out of this as possible and let the market work it out. And smart, clever, greedy capitalists will figure out, exactly how much wind and solar should be in there. If it really is a net positive addition to our electricity grid, smart, clever, greedy capitalists will figure that out. Just like smart, clever, greedy capitalists have figured out how to get oil out of the ground in North Dakota and get it out of the ground even when the price of oil sometimes drops as low as $30 a barrel. They know how to do that profitably because they're smart, they're clever, they're motivated by the profit motive, and that is a very, very powerful motive. And to the extent that the profit motive will bring in wind and solar, let it do it, but keep the subsidies out of the picture, in my opinion.
How about when it comes to the political landscape that we're into right now, where the narrative has shifted quite a bit. And one of the things that we've talked about on this program, and I think you and I have even talked about it a little bit, is this cult of environmentalism that's been on the rise. And we've been tracking it for about 5 years because it's gotten to the point where it's beyond politics. And you've got Colorado doing what they're doing. They've passed some new laws that make it very difficult for about 60% of the land to be drilled on, and the governor came out and called it the war on oil and gas. And then you've got Oregon just passed in the Senate a similar bill that Colorado, Proposition 112, went through on. And a federal judge in Wyoming put a halt on some leases, for the first time. And now you got two presidential candidates, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, actually saying in their presidential platform they're going to ban oil and gas drilling if elected. This is getting out of hand. What's going on? I mean, whatever happened to plastic straws? I mean, did they?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm an economist, so I tend to think of these things in economics terms. And so, first of all, I think this has gone far beyond science now, and it's now, to no small extent, it's religion to many people, as opposed to being science. Well, I mean, what I tell people is I show them a picture of the price of oil, a graph of what it's done since 1980. And I tell them that I taught forecasting to MBAs, executive MBAs at LSU for 30 years. And I would show them this picture and I would say, this is the second most difficult thing in the economy to forecast in the future. And you can see why. It's highly variable. It bounces all over the place. And it moves for reasons that are very unpredictable. I mean, who could have predicted in 2014, for example, the latter part of 2014, that the Saudis would suddenly pump a whole lot of oil on the market? Who would have guessed that? And then drive the price down to under 30 at one point. Who could have predicted that? Then I'll show them a picture of the price of the food consumption in the United States, which is a nice, neat straight line going straight up. And I said, scientifically speaking, it's clear that it's easier to forecast food consumption than it is oil prices. I mean, it doesn't take a mental giant to figure that out. It's statistics. The more stable something is, the easier it is to forecast. And so oil prices are, I can tell them, the second most difficult thing to forecast because it's very highly variable and unpredictable what it's going to do. And I say, if I told you I could forecast the price of oil 20 years in the future, plus or minus $2 a barrel, and we should change all of our living standards, all of our tax structure and everything based on my ability to forecast oil prices, you would say, you are nuts. We can see that it's very difficult for us. We can't do that. We're not going to do that. And oil prices are the second most difficult thing to forecast. The most difficult thing to forecast is the climate. It's changing all the time, and it's changing for reasons that are very unpredictable, in my humble opinion. And so the idea that we should change our entire lifestyle and our tax structure and everything on the notion that somebody can forecast the climate, weather, I don't care what you call it, 20 years in the future, plus or minus 2 degrees, to me is absurd. That is just scientifically absurd. And one of the indicators that's absurd, I say, let's do a little investigation. Go back and look at what the headline said on the first Earth Day about 33 years ago. And the headlines on first Earth Day 33 years ago were, man-made global cooling is going to destroy the Earth. We don't do something about it. That's what they said. And then, of course, we had the hockey stick in the 90s. and it switched to man-made global warming is going to destroy the earth. We don't do something about it. Well, then suddenly the warming thing kind of went flat. It didn't warm anymore. So they had to come up with another angle. And so that was man-made, and this is the silliest scientific phrase I've ever heard, man-made climate change. Well, how in the heck do you measure climate change? Of course the climate's going to change. Are you mad? Of course it's going to change. And so I just think it's silly. And the primary reason it is silly, and the primary reason is there's so much activity behind it, is because, Jason, this is a huge industry. This is like a $2 billion industry funded by governments around the world. And they are not going to do anything to stop that money coming in. They're going to keep making the case that this is a problem that's going to destroy us all. That's the only way they're going to get government to continue to give them $2 billion a year. So when I see a situation like this, which makes no sense, my response is follow the money. Why are people promoting this? And I think it's because there's so much money to be made in the sector.
Well, what I think is really kind of interesting in this whole environmental movement and this cult of environmentalism, religion of environmentalism as well, is that we've gotten beyond plastic straws. So at one point, the plastic bags and plastic straws, everybody was okay with it. Even the oil industry was okay with it because they knew they would figure out a new way to use that plastic in a new way. I mean, the market would decide, oh, you don't want straws? Okay, well, we'll just figure out a new hard plastic that pools can go in everybody's backyard for under $2,000 instead. You know, the market will work itself out is what I'm getting at. Now it just seems like the environmentalist of today just texts and trolls and drinks Keurig coffee and points fingers at things. And they don't really go out and do anything. They don't actually go out and try to, Ed Begley Jr., God bless his soul, drove around in a garbage-powered car for a long time, and that's why people talk to him, because he was walking the walk and living it too. Now it just seems like it's a catchphrase and it's a political movement type thing, to where, like I said, two presidential candidates are actually saying a very ridiculous statement, which is we're going to ban oil and gas drilling. That is like, honestly, inviting the world to become the Walking Dead without zombies in a week. I mean, could you imagine without having oil and gas activity immediately? That'd be unreal.
Yeah. It'd be remarkably silly. But there's a whole cadre of people out there that want to keep it in the ground, but they have no idea. They have no idea about the next stage. They have no idea about the next stage. They have no idea about the limitations of wind and solar that you and I have talked about before.
Well,
it's just really remarkably silly. It's like AOC's idea that we'll go from the United States to Europe on a floatable train or something like that instead of planes. It's just silly stuff.
Well, I equate it to, it's like the guy, that fringe candidate, what's his name? Vermin Supreme, that wears a boot on his head, looks like a Merlin guy. And he wants to, do like dragon legislation because Game of Thrones is popular and he knows that'll catch on. That's what it sounds like to me. You make up something absurd like dragon legislation because it sounds hip and cool, and you can pander to the lowest common denominator type thing. That's kind of what it seemed like to me. But talk to me a little bit about what's going on in that narrative. Then, I mean, is this picking up steam? Let's ban it. I mean, like I said, it's happening in a couple states now to where they're doing this.
Well, I mean, here's the interesting thing is that when you look at polls and you ask people, where does climate change in the United States, where does this rank in terms of your issues of concern? The climate change is way the heck down the list. I mean, there are a lot of things people are way more concerned about than climate change. And that's why I think, here's my position. People always vote their pocketbook. And what's going to happen in 2020 is people are going to look around and say, how's the economy doing? And that's what's going to determine who they vote for. If it's doing really, really well, they tend to vote for the incumbent or the incumbent party. If the economy is starting to sink and looking bad, then they vote for the other party. That's just the kind of the way it goes. And so, I think that's a little bit what was at stake in 2016 in the vote we had there between Hillary and Trump. The economy was not doing very well. It had not done very well for 8 years, and then suddenly, you have somebody come along that changes the policies, and now the economy is growing faster. Whatever you think about how crazy he may act from time to time, some of the policy changes he's made have significantly helped the economy to grow better. The reduction in regulations and the lower tax rates are two key things that come to mind. His policies on international trade are a little more problematic, but those other two things, reducing regulation and reducing tax rates, had a significant impact in terms of boosting the economy so far.
Talk to me a little bit about your speaking gigs. Of course, Loren C. Scott, Dr. Loren C. Scott on the line with us here, and he's been speaking. I met him a number of years ago in the Bakken. I know you spoke there. You're big down in the Texas, Louisiana as well, but give yourself a little bit of a plug for who you're speaking for these days and what your topics of conversation are.
Well, if I get outside of the state of Louisiana, of course, in the state of Louisiana, people are mainly interested in what's going on here and specifics about specific towns. When I go, for example, I was in Denver recently talking to a group, and I've been over in the Georgia area, been over Auburn area of Alabama, and I'll be going to the Sandusky part of the Florida Panhandle in about a week to speak to groups. And what we're doing there is talking mainly about two things. We're talking about the national economy in general and how the national economy is doing, what the outlook is for the national economy, and some of the key threats to it. And then the other thing is I'm just talking to people about energy prices, because there are in the U.S. economy things that are what I call super prices. The price of a can of soup is not a super price. The price of a pair of shoes is not a super price. But the price of money rates are a super price. That affects everything. And the same is true of oil and natural gas. So I do talk to them about what they might expect to see happening to the price of oil and the price of natural gas, or some of the kind of key factors, what's going on in those industries right now. So the national economy, and then three kind of super prices: interest rates, price of oil, price of natural gas.
A lot of energy conferences, I bet. A lot of probably annual dinners too.
Yeah, there's really kind of all kinds. They're all over the place. The banking people are keenly interested, like this group I'm talking to said this as a banking industry. The one I talked to in Denver was the people who take care of places like McDonald's and Burger King. They're actual facilities. Their maintenance. They have big firms that maintain and keep these facilities for these large retail establishments and large commercial establishments. So, I mean, the groups I talk to tend to vary all over the place. I'm going to talk to some people later on the year, the Tom Bigby Waterway people who operate along that waterway over in the Tennessee, Alabama area. So it's just the type of client is all over the place, because super prices affect everybody, as it turns out, and so does the national economy.
Dr. Loren C. Scott on the line with us, kind of wrapping up here as we wind everything down. I mentioned I wanted to bring up a topic to you because the thing that I'm kind of speaking on, because I get invited to introduce people. I'm emceeing the Bakken barbecue next week, that sort of thing. So it's a little like you're more of a keynote speaker. I'm more of a paid monkey type thing, which is, hey, we all got our place, right?
Hey,
and
we're all capitalists. We're all capitalists.
Exactly.
Right?
So one of the things I'm adding to it is, just kind of a short little presentation on some things. And I'd really like to hear your reaction on this, because over the course of the last, like I said, 5 years, this rise of environmentalism has happened to where it's gotten into crazy town. It is. It's gotten to a point of ludicrousness and ridiculousness in their truest of Webster's definition. I actually truly kind of believe this, that we live in a day and age where the average environmentalist texts and trolls and drinks Keurig coffee and points figures, whereas the oil and gas industry is out there every day doing reclamation and figuring out new ways to save the planet every day. I have no problem saying the oil and gas industry is one of the leaders in saving the planet right now. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's right, and I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize, for example, one of the things my firm does, we do a lot of economic impact studies, and one of the things we did was the economic impact of the 4 Exxon facilities that exist here in Baton Rouge. We have a big refinery and 3 big chemical plants here, and here's what you will find: it is not only do they create a lot of jobs. Not only do they generate a lot of taxes to help support our schools, teachers, etc., but ExxonMobil is the #1 contributor to the United Way in the Baton Rouge area, by far. I mean, the United Way would be a fraction of what it is now, were it not for the fact that that ExxonMobil was here. These companies tend to be one of the biggest supporters of civic causes in just about any community in which they locate, and that's an untold story about a lot of these companies. You don't find, for example, the liberal area of the LSU campus. You will find hardly any donations coming out of that area to the United Way. But you take somebody like the company that's always under attack, ExxonMobil or Dow Chemical or some of these others, they are typically the largest contributors to the United Way in any community that they're in.
Same thing. I just did an interview today about Whiting Petroleum, donated $200,000 so a new wing in a hospital could have babies and everything like that. And that I bring this up all the time, and that's actually getting back to the beginning part of the subsidies. I'm with you. I'm not a big subsidy guy, but my justification for it was the oil industry gets taxed more than anybody. They pay more fees than anybody. They get regulated more than anybody, and they still pay to make sure that the kids got softball uniforms and the churches can have bake sales. And you know what I mean? These civic causes and these social causes that the government's supposed to kind of help out anyway, they don't seem to. And the oil and gas industry seems to just continually pick up a lot of drop balls that other people seem to, so that communities at least can have a decent quality of life. I agree. That's a very undertold story. That's why we here try to continue to tell those stories, because they are really important. They're very important and told. So, well, let's wrap her up here. How can people get in touch with you, hire you, pay you some money, have you come speak, and also maybe send you an email if they want you to do an economic report?
Well, if they want to contact me, they can contact me on my cell at 225-937-4283. And if they want to contact me by email, lscottecon@gmail.com. lscottecon, ECON, @gmail.com.